Habits 365 Conscious Minds podcast.
Welcome back, guys, to the Conscious Minds podcast. For those of you who do not know me, I am your host, Chris Holbert, and joining me today is my co-host, who is the founder and CEO of Habits 365, Spencer Zide. Spencer, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me on, Chris. Always a pleasure to be on here. Today, we have a really interesting guest who is someone that my mother actually is pretty good friends with in her various career endeavors and things of that nature. And so I'm really excited for this episode. She's an educator and author of the new book, Dangerous Play, Emma Kress. Emma, how are you?
I am good. I'm so excited to be here. And I am a gigantic fan of your mother's. So, if we could talk about your mom for this entire podcast in like the best way possible, that would be awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I'm sure the audience would also enjoy our commentary on that, especially her. So Emma, tell me, you have, I've done a little bit of research on you. I went to your website, I searched around, and your bio, your about us is very interesting. It's very different than most, I guess, people of your stature, but particularly authors and writers. You have three different versions. You have a short version, a long version, and a keeping it real version, which that's something I've never seen before. And it's a very different approach. Talk to me about why that was the method of putting it together. Why not just say, hey, I'm a really great author and I've done this, this, and that? Why preface it, and why make it so different and so authentic that most folks in this industry and in life don't do?
Yeah, I think it's really all about that word you just said, authentic. Authenticity is something that's always been really important to me. When I was teaching full time, I used to teach high school English, and I taught in a way that sought to replicate as much as possible what real readers and what real writers did. And I, every time I sort of would come across an idea or have if somebody else had an idea, I would always just pause and say, is this authentic? Like, is this what real readers and writers do? Or am I just checking boxes and trying to keep kids compliant? In fact, so much so that I had a friend who was like, I'm going to get you a t-shirt that says, is this authentic? Because it was just a real guiding principle for me. And I think because of that, and because I write for teens and children, I feel probably a more intense responsibility to be authentic. And to just like it, I had a long road. I had a really, really long road to getting published. And like, I wanted to be a published writer since I was 10, and I'm 47. And this is my first book, right? So there were a lot of demons that had to get slayed. And I just, I think I'm a good poster child for not giving up. And I think that kids and teens need to see that. They need to see that, you can keep fighting and get to those dreams that you have, whatever those dreams might be. And that, I think the other piece that was really important to me with that, I think in this culture that we are currently in, this sort of Instagram culture, everybody is showing their highlight reel, right? It's like a deeply curated, photoshopped
artificial
version of their lives. Yeah, and it is artificial, and it's not to say that we don't want to have our moments where we, look pretty, but it doesn't. It's not real. Like, it's not substantial. It's not. And honestly, it's not interesting to me. Like, I don't really typically get interested by the photoshopped artificial stuff. I'm more interested in like, okay, give me the grit, like show me the real, what'd you do to get here? So I think that was
And I think that's one of the most important pieces to just life in general. I mean, people, like you said, you just go on social media, you see only the good parts about someone's journey. You don't see the failures, you don't see the struggles, what they had to deal with internally. And honestly, that gives a false sense of how success really is, because
Yeah.
success without failure isn't success at all. Because especially with you, you might be one of the best examples, the epitomes of that. I mean, having to have this dream since you were 10, maybe you wanted to start earlier in your life to be an author and to be the person you are today, but you had to go through so many hardships and failures in your life, which I think should be definitely more publicized than it is on social media, because I think that would
Yeah.
give people more inspiration as well. I mean, when you're seeing all these success stories on social media and not what they had to go through, it gives a false sense of reality on what they actually did to get to that point, which would probably give a lot more of a easy way of having people come to terms with, oh, okay, it's not this linear path that, oh, they did this, this, and this, and they just made it seamlessly. They had to go through those ups and downs, those ebbs and
Exactly.
flows.
Exactly. And you do not become the best version of yourself without failure. Like that's just a required deal. Like that's suck it up. That's part of life. Like it's just right. Like that is you've got to fail. And the trick is how to fail up. And I think you're right. I think when we falsely portray a life without failure, people don't know what to do when they hit the failure, right? They think, oh, this must just be happening to me. I should just let me crawl, into fetal position in the corner and just rock for like the rest of my life,
Right.
right? Like,
Well, it was for you, it was interesting because you not only highlighted your rejections and failures. What I want to know is at whatever age you were when you got rejected for the second time, where you're like, okay, I tried the thing in college, I tried the first book, now I'm trying the second book. Fuck, this is not working. What inside of you made it possible to say, you know what, screw that, I'm gonna try again? Because that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of grit to really kind of just, tighten the straps and just go even harder. Most people, as you were saying, would just be like, after the first one, oh, I'm done. That's it. I lost. I didn't win, and now I'm going home and I'll try something else. And people do that a lot.
yeah.
And it takes so long. It took 37 years for you to get a book deal. So talk to me about that second rejection and how you responded after.
Um, well, I think there were so many rejections. It's not, I don't think it's easy to be like, oh, right, that was the second one, right? Because I'm old. There's been lots of rejections. I think for me, a big part of it was reframing my purpose, right? So when I was 10, I was like, I want to be a published author. And I kept saying that. And yet I wasn't writing. I wasn't writing. And it wasn't until and I did like an actual like journaling exercise to get me here. And I realized that phrase had been holding me back because it was all about an external thing. And it had nothing to do with my passion and my heart and my journey, right? It was somebody else's judgment on who I would be. It wasn't mine. And so the minute I flipped that script and said instead, I love to write, well, whoosh, I mean, just, the doors opened. I was like, yeah, that's right. I really do love to write. Like it isn't about being a published author. And certainly that has been wonderful this year to have that dream finally realized. But it wasn't until I removed, it wasn't until I did that reframing that I was able to get there. Right. So that was a big piece. And, I spent a lot of time saying no to myself, right? Like that was the other thing. Like I would reject myself before somebody else had the chance. So in college, there was a creative writing class, and you had to submit work to be to be invited. Like that's how serious the creative writing class was. And I was too scared. I wanted to do it so badly, but I was too scared. So I didn't submit my work. So I didn't take the one creative writing class at my stupid college.
Wow.
And now I look back and it's like what were you scared of? That is so dumb.
Yeah.
Why would you say no to yourself? And I think, what I've learned is, look, the world is lining up to say no to you, right? Like I have a whole lot of people who have been lining up to say no to me over the years, and they have. Why would I say no to myself? And I have, that has been like a real shift in the way that I think about my writing and the way that I think about being daring in terms of like trying to market my writing. Like I would have like the things I did this year to try to get the word out about my book. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I would have had the guts to do, I would be like, no, I'll just write in my little corner, like happily over here. So yeah, it's really become a wonderful eye-opening and door-opening shift to kind of have this belief of, no, I'm not going to be the one to say no to me. The world has got that.
Yeah, right.
They're doing just fine with that. So I don't need to help out. I don't need to add to that chorus.
Yeah, and you would actually love the first episode of the podcast we have because
I cannot wait. I cannot wait. I need to listen to every episode. 19 you've got so far?
But we've only had
Right.
2 online so far. But the first episode, it was kind of like this. It was an introduction type of episode, but more so had some factual things, some mental things, and I kind of touch on that a lot of people reject themselves before they allow themselves to be rejected externally.
Yes.
And it's because of the opinion you have of yourself. Some people don't have a high opinion of themselves, and it kind of hinders them on doing the things they want to do in life. And they're so afraid of rejection itself that they decide, I'm not even going to do that. I'm going to reject myself first so I don't go through the heartaches and struggles of that actual realization.
As if that's not going to hurt just as
exactly.
much. Right? And that's the thing. Like, it hurts more because it's coming from you. Like, you should treat yourself like I need to treat myself, Spencer, like I treat your mama, right? Like right. I need to be like, no, you are like awesome, right? You like, I need to say that to me and talk to myself in that kind of inner voice, right? Otherwise, you're just bringing so much negative. And again, there's enough, like
there's enough negativity.
Like, don't be worried that you're going to get a big head, because you're not. There's going to be plenty of people who knock it down
quickly, right?
Yeah. So there's really not a concern that it's going to become a problem.
Right. And Emma, what you just said there was interesting because I don't remember who it was. I think I was just aimlessly scrolling through YouTube or TikTok, and I saw this, and it was a doctor of psychology, something along those lines, and he said, most people talk to themselves. I do. I'm sure you guys do at some points, even if you won't admit it, I'm sure you do at some points. And what he said was, the way you talk to yourself, imagine if you talked to yourself the way you talk to your friends. Would a lot of them still be friends with you? So if you're always ripping on yourself, you stupid idiot, how could you do that? Like, how dumb are you? Like, why did you not do this? Like, if you spoke to your friends that way, they'd be like, screw this guy. I'm not hanging out with him. I don't want him involved. Like, he's so negative. And so you have to almost treat yourself like your best friend in a sense, because the worse you treat yourself, the worse you talk about yourself, the worse you're going to end up feeling. You're not going to want to be around yourself. You're not going to want to be present, and you're going to always just be so negative. But if you start flipping that switch and talking, positively about yourself to yourself, that's going to make all the difference. Because imagine now, if you spoke this way to your friends, he's such a delight to be around. He's so nice to me. He or she is encouraging, and it's a good light. And so for you to be able to kind of figure that out on a dime is really impressive and really important in a sense.
Yeah. I think that's very, very true. And, the other thing that this is making me think about is, and and Spencer, your mom, like I talk about this literally all the time. Like this is something that my friends really honestly would be like, dude, could you stop talking about this stupid boat? Like, but so I think this is an incredibly helpful thing for me, which is that I think a lot about my boat, and what's in my boat is what I can control. What's outside my boat is what I can't control, right? And you can control that self-talk, right? That is really one of the few things on the planet that you do have control over. You can control how you spend your time and how you think of yourself and how who you choose to be around. That's all in your boat. There is so much that is not in your boat, and I think, all of us have certainly had to face the hardships of that in the last couple of years for sure, right? So, I that for me is a deeply centering thing. And, for going back to what I was saying before about that I want to be published thing, that's outside my boat. But I love to write, that's inside my boat, right? And what I've noticed about myself is that when I am dipping into the water outside my boat, I am unhappy. I feel it in my butt, like I get clenched. I feel like a tightness in my chest. I start to kind of have more shallow breathing. Like I am an unhappy creature. And so I think that the more that you can figure out, like have that kind of conversation with yourself, is, when you, especially when you sense that happening in your body, is this in my boat? Okay, if it's not, I need to figure out how to reframe this so that I can stay in my boat, because it's not good out
Yeah,
there.
no.
Like the waters out there are not, they're shark infested, man. Like you don't want to be in those. So I think that kind of goes along with what we're talking
Yeah,
about
and
as
at the end
well.
of the day, you spend the most time with yourself. So it's like you want to have that time to yourself to be the best time. If it's the worst time, it's like, well, you can't escape it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So going to the book you've written most recently, Dangerous Play. Talk to me about the inspiration behind that book. I know you've done a little bit of background in the city. You worked where did I forget exactly where you worked with
Yeah. So the book is called
Dangerous
Dangerous
Play. Yep.
Play. And I'm going to hold it up for the video
Yeah.
thing because,
Okay.
oh my gosh, this cover is
It's
just
bomb. I like
like,
it.
right? I mean, can
It's
you just like,
amazing.
it just radiates
It does.
badassery and like, it's just, yeah. So it's about a team of field hockey girls in central New York who, one of them is sexually assaulted, and her ride or die team decide to become vigilantes to make sure that no girl is unsafe in their town again. But of course, problems happen.
Like anything.
And you have to be and then, but it could risk everything. Doof, doof, doof. Like you have to do the doof, doof, doof at the end. That's a critical part of introducing your book is the doof, doof, doof. But yeah, so it came from a lot of different things. I think this is certainly the book that I needed when I was a teen. And interestingly, it was the book I needed at the time that I was writing it, which that's a whole other part of the conversation. But as an author for young adults, it is a funny thing the way you inhabit both those spaces at the same time. That's a whole other thing. But so in terms of what led to it, I think I had long noticed a gap in young adult literature because, again, I was an English teacher, so I was around young adult literature for a long, long time, and I would always try and pair kids with their, ideal book. And, my fierce athletic girls didn't have a whole lot of books that I could stick in their hands and be like, oh, this is so you, right? And I had a lot of students who were deeply committed to their sport, but it wasn't there. And so I really wanted to have like on field action, right? Like, and like girls just kicking ass all over a field and, getting turf burn and counting their bruises because they're proud of how hard how hard they worked for them. And that I hadn't really seen. And so that was certainly a part of it. I think along those lines, I am a gigantic action movie fan. Like there is no debate in my house. Die Hard is absolutely an essential Christmas movie. Let's just put it like that. Like there's no question.
Great movie.
Um,
Yeah, it's a great
right?
movie.
I like okay, so we could have like an hour just throwing back quotes is what could happen. Come out to the coast. We'll have a couple laughs.
Right.
Anyway, so I love action movies, but I'm also a feminist. And I have to say, being a feminist and watching a lot of these action movies hurts a little bit, right? Like I love it. I love the ferocity. I love the action. I love the often there's vengeance and there's heroes being hero-like. And often the girls are just like not treated well. They're not three-dimensional. They are, even in Die Hard, man, they're just like a poster on the wall, like that he taps as he goes by. So I wanted to put fierce girls and allow them to have that action hero treatment. And so that was also where it came from. And then, of course, there's the rape culture piece. Now, I started this in 2014, which was before the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement came in 2017. So that is sort of a whole other conversation because I was revising this when the Me Too movement happened. But in terms of my background, I did used to, in college, I was a peer counselor for sexual violence survivors. And I also ran this group where we would go into local high schools and facilitate training for, they were skits really. And we would facilitate conversations around sexual violence and particularly relationship abuse and date rape, and kind of help teens kind of look at the muddy and the gray and pick out what happens. It was very cool because we would do these skits, and then the actors would stay in character. And sometimes I was an actor and sometimes I was the facilitator. And then the audience could ask questions of the actors. And so it really allowed us to have conversations that are really challenging to have. So I did that for several years. And then when I graduated, I worked at a place called Victim Services in Manhattan, which is now called Safe Horizon. And I did a lot of work with domestic violence survivors and helped start the New York City Rape Treatment Consortium. So yes, I had like this background, right? And then I think the other piece that happened is, when I became a teacher and I would have some of my girl students in particular were sharing stories of what was happening to them in the hall. And it wasn't rape, right? And I think there were a lot of wonderful young adult books that tracked the story of a survivor of rape. But there weren't really any that were taught, at least when I started. There are now, which is fantastic. But there weren't when I started around rape culture, right? And so I just wanted to explore, what happens to girls when we raise them in rape culture? It's just, and it's complex, and it's sometimes dark and sometimes messy. And I just wanted to kind of dig into that a little bit. Did you guys see Promising Young Woman?
I have not.
That movie?
I have not.
Okay, you have to see it. It's just
We
It's a
will
good
see it.
movie.
I won't talk about it. No spoiler.
No
But I
spoil.
think I will say when I watched that, it came out I think in January or sometime this year. And I thought, oh, this person was interested in the same question. What happens to girls when we raise them in rape culture? And that is a version of what happens to girls when we raise them in rape culture.
Okay.
And so, when you talk about, being a feminist, the Me Too movement, rape culture, and you put, this book out that, features fierce young, girls, what message are you trying to send to not just those young women, but everybody? Who are you trying to, quote unquote, sell to? What are you trying to share with your reader and with, the observers of this book?
I think I would love it if it started conversations. I think when I first started writing, I maybe got a little bit too involved with messages, right? And the older I get as a human and as a writer, I'm less interested in answers and I'm more interested in questions and people spending time on those questions. Um, and so I don't know that I have I wanted to find this person and my hope is that it finds the people who need it. Um, it would be great if people feel seen and heard. And I have what this has been actually interesting to me is I have gotten some really nice feedback from male readers who've read it. And who have said, and it's interesting because they're actually the characters who are fully developed, like the male characters who are like primarily are awesome. Like they're like wonderful humans.
Yeah.
And so I think, and that was super intentional, right? Like, because it is not all men. It is, it is a culture that we are all a part of that frankly harms men as much as it harms women. And certainly non-gendered people, right? Like it harms everybody. So, yeah, so that has actually been gratifying to have some male readers say how much this meant to them, and it made them think back on their high school years, and also kind of get what it maybe feels like to be under the magnifying lens of rape culture as an objectified person.
Yeah, and it's so important to talk about the things that may be uncomfortable at times, and through a theatrical literatural sense, it's just when you convey a message and try to empower it rather than suppress it, you create a sense of, okay, this is okay to talk about, this is okay to
Yeah.
have this be heard and have the ignorance set aside, and now you can kind of get into that magnifying glass and a greater understanding of what it's all about. So I think the main message that you were trying to send was very important because not a lot of people try to actually think about those dark things. And as dark as it is, it has some light has to be shed on it, because it is a
Yes.
part of society. It does happen. So what you have done and the book that you have written is very powerful and to a lot of people, which is
Yeah,
amazing.
and I think you bring up such a good point of, in silence and darkness, bad things fester,
Yeah.
right? And so I think the more that we can shine light on the ugly in our society, and the more that we can shine light on the ugly in ourselves and have the courage to face it and question it. And again, I think that's why I shy away from the answer thing, because I think that comes with judgment, that comes with and I think it makes people feel as though they can't look at the ugly in themselves, right? Whereas I think if we sit and allow ourselves to be uncomfortable, that is a very like discomfort is a really like mature feeling to have, and it is a tough thing to live through, right? But as certainly as a white person, I need to sit with discomfort and I need to face some things, right? And maybe it's not things that I did intentionally, right? But it is certainly a part of the culture in which I live and have grown up. And so that is something that I have to do if I want to become a better human, if I want this world to become a safer place for people I care about.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
That I think it's important to, like Chris said, shed a light on those things. And I think, without getting too deep into the weeds, over the last 4, 5, 6 years, I think we've all been, pretty uncomfortable with, a
Yeah.
lot of different things that have been going on. Whether it's culturally, socially, politically, whatever the case may be, we've become, like you said earlier in the show, this is an Instagram culture. this is a different era than, when I was in, little school, or, even when I was in high school. Like, this is a different type of system. This is a different type of just society that I'm not too used to. And it's always changing and always evolving. My question for you, as a writer, as a thinker, as somebody who, has experience in these different realms, what is the answer to, and there is maybe no answer, and maybe the answer is a question, but what is the solution, or how do we get past this kind of just built up resentment and hatred of others who, look differently, who think differently? How do we get past the virtue signaling? How do we get past the, instant gratification, or rather need for instant gratification, in this, new culture, this new era that we've kind of stumbled into? Where do we go from here?
Oh my gosh, it's a really good question. If you could have somebody on who's smarter than me and has the answer to that, I am. I mean, I think the fact that you are asking that question is really important, right? I think the more of us that ask that question, the better, right? Like, just that alone, just questioning it, just saying, maybe this isn't how we all have to live. Just that, I think, can be a revolutionary thought that can lead to some beautiful things. I think the other thing is, again, it's in your boat, right? And the way that other people treat other people, unfortunately, is not in my boat. So I have to think about, okay, how do I frame this for how to keep this in my boat, right? So in my boat is, do I speak up if I hear somebody say something that is not contributing to the kind of culture that I think we should be living in, right? And that can be like not even something as blatant as racism, though that's certainly something that we should speak up about, or I want to speak up about anyway. But the other day I heard somebody just be really nasty about somebody else who was not present.
Mm.
And I just said, is that the way we need to talk about this person? And I was so proud of myself after, as silly as that sounds, right? But I was so proud of myself. I was like, yeah, like, I don't want to live and let that go by, right? I think the more Brene Brown, have you guys read Brene Brown?
I don't think I have.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that is, I'm gifting her
Yeah,
to
you're
you
putting us on to
right
so many
now.
different things right now.
You will adore her, because she is genius and also just incredibly likable. But she talks a lot about the dehumanization in the way that we talk about people, right? And the way that we talk about people that are not like us. So, and she uses examples from, both political parties dehumanizing people in the other, right? Like calling somebody a pig, or calling somebody the devil, or like whatever they sort of, they're taking away their humanity. And that is not probably the way that we move past hate, right?
No,
Like, if we're going to move past hate, I think we need to bring people close. We need to see them as human. And even though that's hard, and I think, in my boat is that I will sometimes have those conversations with people who I disagree with deeply. And sometimes I won't, because I need to protect my mental health, and I need to not rock in the corner for the next 5 days. But part of it is about, like, seeing the humanity of a person through the disagreement. Like, that is so critical. And again, I don't have control over whether other people are doing that, but I do have control over whether I am engaging in that harmful rhetoric, right? And then other things too, right? Like, I can donate to places, right? If I am financially able, I can volunteer, and in various capacities. So I can affect change in those kind of ways. But I honestly think the biggest way is to just in my everyday life try to be the person I most want to be around, as to circle back what we were talking about before. And that includes somebody who is the kind of person who stands up when somebody is not being kind, right?
Yeah, and I think you hit on a really important point. And to add on to that, I think a sense of community, whether it's where you actually live or who you are
Yes.
connected to, is so important because people see community and you cannot differ a community between itself, like the whole thing, and the individuals that are within it. Like community is found within the individual as well as everyone else that's a part of it. So when
Yeah.
you look at community in the sense that, oh, it's not the lump sum of every individual that creates this big community. It's, oh, I am the community. When you find yourself as being the community, what do you represent? What do you want to change, or what do you want to talk about? What do you want to kind of implement into the greater sense of everything to create a better sense of community outside yourself? Because once you find the community within yourself, it's like, oh, I can change, and then I will influence people around me to change, and then the community around me will then get better. And maybe this dehumanization of things will be lesser, and love will spread, and less hate will flourish from
Yes.
that.
Well, and again, to keep it within the boat, you don't know if it's going to spread. And you don't know if other people will come along with you.
It's out of your
And
control.
that has to be okay.
Yeah, you have to accept that.
Right, exactly.
But you are going to be better. And therefore, with any luck, some people will come along in
Yeah,
your boat,
hopefully you can
right? But
influence them. Yeah.
And I've heard so much of this. Well, we'll share perspectives and try to understand, try to empathize, even though I think we're in a bit of a post reality society right now, to a degree, at least. There are only many opinions. There's only one facts, and that goes for both sides. That goes for many different issues. There's only one set of facts, and I feel like we don't care as a whole about the facts anymore. We care about the narratives. We care about how we feel. We care about X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, that's goes for a lot of people on certain issues. And what I've realized is you can be 100% right about the situation in many cases, and it just doesn't matter. And so the question becomes, how do we get past that? Well, how about maybe we just talk to them, right? We don't need to talk about deeply I guess rooted issues in our society. We don't need to talk about at length the income inequality or the racial inequality or the global warming catastrophe. We don't need to really get too deep into that. We can just grab a beer and talk about the football game. We can just talk about what we like in New York City, what our favorite restaurants are. To a degree, I think that we should be learning other people's perspectives. We should be talking to other people, and we should be trying to understand people to an extent. Of course, in the boat, protecting your mental health. We want to have one set of facts. Once we get multiple, then we want to shut that off. But I feel like just talking to people and just kind of seeing where they're at and sort of meeting them halfway without necessarily bending over backwards might be something that I feel like, not to provide a necessary solution that's foolproof, because it's not. But I feel like that's one method that could just work, is just chat with people.
because I think what you're getting at is it restores our faith in humanity in the other side, right? So if you can have a beer with somebody, or watch a football game, and you can stand next to each other and laugh about something, right? And you each know that the other is the other, like whatever that means, right? Like you there's an awareness that the other is the other. Perhaps, and again, it's outside our boat, but perhaps the next time a sort of desire comes to vilify the other, you have in your head, well, I did share that laugh with that guy. And so it's maybe not that he's an evil like nightmare, right? He is a human. And so if people are human, then maybe if we tap into humanity, there's a way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about humanity, it's like we're all connected at some point. There's some way that we are all the same, even though there's so many differences externally. We all connect to something that we can at least find that commonality amongst each other. So I think when you
Yeah.
find that commonality, that's when the real connection starts. And there's always something, no matter how different you are from someone else, there is always that one thing that you can at least agree on, you know?
Yeah, although, and again, like I think it's, and again, this is a maturity thing, right? Like it's holding two things that are seemingly opposites at the same time. And on the one hand, yes, we're all humans. We all have more in common than we do apart, than differences. And yet, you know, there's real harm being done, right? Like by humans to other humans right now. And that feels urgent and horrible. And like right now, like I'm getting angry just thinking about it, right? Like the fact that people are hurting other people in personal ways and in systemic
Yeah,
ways.
yeah.
So how do it's holding those two things at the same time. I think that is critical because it's a place of privilege to also just sit on the side where we're like, well, everybody's human and it's okay, because that probably means that you're not getting as hurt as you could get in this world, right? So we also, especially if we are people who are coming from places of privilege, either because I'm white and I live in a house and I have enough to eat, right? Like these are places of privilege I come from. I have to especially remember to keep that other hand up, right? Like to keep that other hand of no. Like there's still really horrific things being done. And that we need to, be aware of that and try to do something about that as well.
Yeah, and
Right.
being aware of yourself is definitely a very important part as well, which is going to lead to this. So there's a lot of things that people can do for themselves, like you can't, like we said before, you can't change always what's outside of you, but you can always change what's within you. And so my question to you is like, what have you kind of changed within yourself to help become the person you are today? I mean, you've obviously dealt with a lot of hardships and a lot of ups and downs. So what have you implemented in terms of like habits or meant, whether it's physical things you do or like mental tricks you have? What are some of those things that you've developed for yourself?
That's such a good question. Some I think I've already shared, right? Like the in the boat thing is a really centering exercise for me when I'm feeling, and because it focuses it because it hits on exactly what we were just talking about. It hits on, okay, what can I do? Right? Like I can't control that person over there, but could I do something that maybe causes a
An
ripple, right?
influence.
Could I do something that and that situates me in feeling like I'm trying, right? I'm trying. I'm trying to like row against the tide
Yeah.
of this, right? Um so I think that's one thing, and I think the other thing that we already talked about, which is the never saying no to myself, right? Like that I think is a really key thing when you're trying to become your best self in the world. And there's that great quote where something like I think it's by Marianne Williamson, where she says, you're not serving the world by playing small, right? And I love that, right? Like I don't want to play small. I want to play big. In my book, actually, the coach at one point says, "Oh, you've dreamed big. You need to play bigger." Right? And I think that that's really critical. So that, right, like this mental kind of piece. But the other piece is like tuning into your body. And that is something that I had not done for a really, really long time in my life. Like really until I became pregnant. I didn't really, I just it wasn't like I just didn't like get what all the fuss was. Like I just wasn't like a part of it really. And then that kind of being responsible for growing another human, right? Like that'll shift your that'll shift
That's
your
a big
perspective.
shift.
It's a big shift on how you feel about your body and like what it's capable of. And I think starting to just understand that the things that I had seen as flaws and like pain were my body's way of communicating with me, right? Like were my body's way of talking to me. And seeing myself in partnership with my body as opposed to kind of in opposition to or in frustration with was a big deal. And yoga helped a ton with that. And yeah, just being physical, like going for walks and being out in the world. I mean, your mom, Spencer, is like the queen
That's
of
like
this.
5 miles a day.
She like takes it to a whole. I'm like, I'll just take a walk around the block. Like,
Right.
how about that? So that's my level. Like, she is on like a whole other. But yeah, I think just allowing yourself permission to take care of yourself and listen to yourself. There's a lot of the world is trying to shut you up, right? And so I think, especially if you are a woman or from a marginalized community, there's a lot invested in shutting you up. So I think listening to yourself is like you can't guarantee that anybody else will listen to you, but you can listen to you, and I think that's critical.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, Emma, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. Getting to know you, getting to know your background and everything, and your connection with Spencer's mom is obviously unparalleled. I mean,
That's a first.
I love her. You need to have her on now. Like that should be like the follow-up episode.
Right.
yeah, I won't
We
be
gotta
on
do
that one.
that.
It'll
No,
just be
this was such a
Spencer.
treat. This was such a treat. It really was. It was really nice to get to know you guys and to talk a little bit about all this deep thinking things.
Yes, this was so fun. Well, it is the Conscious Minds podcast,
Yep.
so I'm glad we did that. Emma, before we close out, can you just hold your book up so the audience is able to see that lovely cover? Emma's book, Dangerous Play. Go buy it, read it, enjoy it. You won't regret it.
Change your perspective always. Always keep in
Thank
mind others'
you.
thoughts. And so, thanks for joining us. See you on the next episode.